Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The King's Speech, starring Colin Firth, Jeffrey Rush, Helena Bonham Carter, and Guy Pearce, directed by Tom Hooper. Now, before I get into this review, I remember going a couple times to see this in theaters and remember being really impressed with it. Well, it's won Best Picture of the Year at the Oscars of the year 2011. So, will this be the best movie that deserves the Oscar? Let's get into the movie and find out. It's 1925, and Prince Albert, the Duke of York, who will be known later as King George VI, but I'm going to call him Bertie for the rest of the show, and played by Colin Firth, speaks at the close of the 1925 British Empire exhibition at Wembley Stadium alongside with his wife Elizabeth, played by Helena Bonham Carter, as he can't say a speech without hesitation, while there are thousands in attendance, and he tries ways to improve his speech treatments with different doctors, and they're all unfortunately unsuccessful, as he almost gives up in the year 1934 until Elizabeth finds an Australian speech therapist in London named Lionel Logue, played by Jeffrey Rush. And I have speech problems myself too. As you might have seen in the shows, I can honestly relate to Bertie, as he sees Lionel as his speech therapist, as I've had one in the past, and I really like the characters, as Colin Firth, Jeffrey Rush, and Helena Bonham Carter are absolutely tremendous, as they turn in some great performances, and the location of London is shot better here than in other things like A Good Year, for example, as this is a much better movie than A Good Year, in my opinion. And there's a reason it won Best Picture of the Year in 2011. Bertie tells a bedtime story to their two daughters, Margaret and Elizabeth. Elizabeth, I don't know, Junior, because Elizabeth is Helena Bonham Carter's character, but I'm not referring to her. But let's move on. A fairy tale of some kind, and after they go to sleep, Elizabeth talks, and I mean Helena Bonham Carter's Elizabeth, talks Bertie into seeing Lionel. As we move on to Lionel auditioning for a play, but he unfortunately didn't get the part. But the next scene comes, and Elizabeth takes Bertie to see Lionel. And these scenes are well directed, well shot, and very well made, as the editing is very tightly paced, in my opinion. Lionel asks questions as Bertie and asks him to call each other by their names, as he prefers to treat each other equally, as he tells him not to smoke, as Bertie believes it helps him, while Lionel explains it's causing cancer, which is true, by the way, folks. I'm going to not lie to you there, because I'm not a very good liar. And Bertie refuses to speak to Lionel, as Bertie has a temper, and it shows it as Lionel shows he cannot stutter without music at first, and tries again with music playing in the headphones, and he's led to believe it's hopeless, and Lionel gives him the record he recorded for his voice as a souvenir, but Bertie believes speech therapy isn't for him, and the speech therapy session was very engaging to me, in my opinion. We get Bertie's father, King George V, played by Harry Potter's Michael Gambon, made a successful speech, as he tells Bertie to make a speech as he can't read the speech, and King George has a monologue about if he can do it, anyone can, as he tells him to form his words carefully. In the next scene, he hears the record from Lionel after finishing off some music, as he can make a speech while music is going, as he was amazed, as was Elizabeth, and Bertie comes back to Lionel as he believes it is working, and asks to improve his speech therapy as long as they have an agreement, and start the speech session with the voice testing. And I like the score in this movie, as the composer Alexandre Desplat has turned some great scores from this to the Grand Budapest Hotel to even The Shape of Water, for Christ's sakes. And the art direction is beautiful. And we move on to Sandringham. In the year 1936, Bertie visits his brother David, or King Edward VIII, or as I'll call him David for the rest of the show, played by Guy Pearce, to talk with their father, King George, as he talks about how David is not the king type, or is it Bertie? I couldn't tell you which way it goes. I think it was David. As we learned earlier in the movie, as Bertie and David come to the dinner table after being on the phone with his wife, and next day King George has passed away, and David is about to become king while he cries for his father and runs upstairs. And when they get to the model of the stairs, that's a great shot. as Lionel does some acting for his two boys until they smile and his next appointment is here, and as it turns out, it's Bertie, and tells him he's been practicing an hour a day, and they drink to the memory of his father as he brings up music. And this movie has so many great shots all over itself. As this premise works, Bertie starts calling Lionel by his name, and they talk about memories of his past, who he was closest to growing up, and start to randomly sing, which was beautiful. And we move on to David having a party at his house and have an argument about how he's handling the king's business. And it doesn't go well as David mocks Bertie and the dialogue is smartly written. Bertie visits Lionel and they talk about how to cuss at David, like saying shit and fuck to his face, and go out for a walk as Bertie tells Lionel David has to either divorce his wife in America or have her become his queen. And Bertie and Lionel talk about it, and Bertie dismisses Lionel from his services, and that was a sad scene, but very well written and well acted, as Lionel tries to visit Bertie, but Bertie somehow pushes him away, and Bertie is once again stuttering on his words, and I'm liking this movie quite a bit as it's working and engaging me. Bertie tells David because he's marrying a divorced woman, telling him to stand down and no longer be king, as Bertie becomes king. And we move on to December of the year 1936. And he talks in front of some people as he's stuttering on his speech and comes back home while his family are preparing to move into the palace. As Bertie is crying about his speech stuttering, as well as he doesn't feel like a king. And Elizabeth confesses she rejected two of his proposals in marriage because she's afraid of being someone who has the power of being a king. But she ended up marrying him, and that was a beautiful monologue from Helena Bonham Carter, as she and Bertie come to the home of Lionel as they apologize to each other, and tells him he has to make a Christmas speech, and asks Lionel for help. And Bertie and Elizabeth are seen by Lionel's wife, Myrtle, played by Jennifer Eel. And this movie is great to look at and great to listen to, as it works great. Bertie asks for Lionel to be in the speech room with him, and they get prepared for the speech, as they don't practice the speech out of Bertie's request, as they talk about how from his acting he can be a speech therapist, as he wasn't at first, as he was an actor, as we saw in our earlier scenes. Lionel eventually sits in a powerful king's chair, and Bertie tells Lionel to get up because he has a voice, and Bertie has almost let go of his duties from a bishop of a church, until Bertie tells the bishop he stays. And this is a great movie about friendship between a king and a speech therapist. Bertie and Elizabeth and their two daughters of theirs watch a movie about what Adolf Hitler is doing to the Jews, as this is, I believe, when World War II started. I could be wrong. And we move on to September 3rd, 1939, as Lionel's sons are grown up and hear the news of England being at war with Germany. And Bertie asks Lionel for help with his speech, and Lionel brings one of his sons to the building, and they have 40 minutes to practice the king's speech, and Bertie is stuttering, and Lionel tells him to sing, and they run out of time, and before he makes a speech, he stutters as he has a brief word with Winston Churchill. And the performance by Colin Firth is very well done, as well as Geoffrey Rush and Helena Bonham Carter. Bertie approaches the microphone while Elizabeth tell him good luck, and Lionel to help him out with his speech, and he advises to only say it to only Lionel as a friend, and Lionel tells him to breathe and finish after the end of each sentence, and Bertie delivers such a successful speech. It takes a photo and is congratulated and looks out to the crowd and waves at them as Bertie and Lionel become good friends, and the climax was beautiful, as it was beautifully done by director Tom Hooper, and we'll see how great this movie is with the rating. I'll give this movie a 8.5 out of 10. The actors are tremendous as they turn in some great performances, and the cinematography is shot better than in A Good Year, in my opinion, as it's a much better movie than that, as there's a good reason it won the Oscars in the year 2011 as best. This movie was well done, very well made, as the editing was very tightly paced, well, in my opinion. I really like the score, as the art direction is beautiful, as the movie has great shots all over the place. The premise works, and the dialogue is very well written throughout the movie, and there's a great reason this movie was nominated for Oscars in the year 2011, and it won 4, but this movie works spectacularly. The dialogue is smartly written, and this is a great movie, and I'm very glad I reviewed it for the show, as this is a solid recommendation, and this is a great movie about friendship between a king and his speech therapist, as it works tremendously. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this review, and until then... Sorry, I'm preparing my speech.